days in a row. At least I can. So there you go.
Thanks, Gail. Good evening, everyone. My name is Brad Solitone. I'm a recovered alcoholic.
Hi, Brad.
As I was just saying, Kevin sends his apologies. He's unable to make it today. He has another AA commitment, and so he's unable and asked me to fill in. So for that, I apologize to the rest of you. Um, let's get started as usual with um, the set aside prayer to kick off the meeting. And if Rob, if you're putting it in the chat, we'll go with that one because my version that I have on my phone's a little bit different, I think. Or I can just read mine off my phone. All right, this one's a little bit different. My favorite set aside prayer story, is being at a Big Book weekend. And every time somebody read the set aside prayer, somebody came and told them that the version they were reading was wrong. So I like to start a big study with the set aside prayer as it reminds me that I need to remain open-minded. I have a lot to learn in life still, and in this program in particular. So the set aside prayer goes like this, or this version of it does, anyways. God, today help me set aside everything I think I know about you, everything I think I know about myself, everything I think I know about others, and everything I think I know about my own recovery, so I may have an open mind and a new experience with all these things. Please help me see the truth. Amen. All right. So, again, this being the fourth dimension big book study, we like to start off with reading in the two places in the big book where it mentions the fourth dimension. The first one, and this is in the chat, the first one is in page 8. It says, I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. Right, so that's on page 8. On page 25, it says, we have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. Right, so that's the two places in the book where it talks about that. Coincidentally, we are on page 25 today in the book. We had left off with that reading of having been rocketed into the fourth dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. So that's where we left off last week. In the chapter, there is a solution. And so I don't have too much to say about last week, I guess. We're essentially learning about what our solution to our problem is. We've learned what the problem was, in the doctor's opinion, and now we're focusing on what the solution is. So, um, I'm going to read you the next paragraph, and then I probably have some stuff to share to you about this paragraph. It says, we're halfway down the page on page 25. It says, the great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude towards life, toward our fellows, and toward God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. Right? So that's not how I used to read that paragraph at all. I used to read it that said, the central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. And this story actually involves Kevin. But there's a speaker in AA that I've listened to right from my early days, and I've since, and this actually is the moment that I met him. There's a great big event every year called the Banff Roundup that happens just outside of Calgary. Calgary AA puts it on, but it happens in Banff, just in the mountains. And the speaker's name is Scott L. from Nashville, Tennessee. And I did not realize that he was a speaker this year at the Banff Roundup. And Kevin is almost always the MC of the Banff Roundup. So I get there. Kevin's talking to some guy. I join the conversation. They're talking about this very paragraph. And Kevin quoted it the same way that I always did, that God enters into our hearts and lives. And Scott says you could read that another way. And he says he enters into our hearts and lives in a way that is truly miraculous, right? And I like that version much better. And I like the idea of God living, because the center, because this book, it tells us on page 55 that where we find God is deep down within us, right? And so God enters into our hearts and lives in a way which is truly miraculous, right? And so it changes the meaning of it for me, and I think it's more to me anyways, it's a more profound meaning, and I like it quite a bit more. Um, the other thing Kevin likes to talk about lots is, it says the great fact is just this and nothing less, that we've had this deep and effective spiritual experiences, right? And Kevin talks about these yardsticks or measuring sticks, that are throughout this book. And so this is another good one to ask myself, right? When I get to this part of the book, is to take a little bit of time and think about, has God entered into my life, right? Is God the central fact of my life, or is there other things that are between me and God, right? So, does my entire life, do I invite God into all aspects of my life, all parts of my life? Or are there parts where I'm like, because it's really easy for me to say, like, hey, God, you got all this stuff, but you know what? I think money, I better look after money still. I'm not sure. I know you know what I need, but I don't know if, you're going to provide everything I need, but I'm not sure if you and I are on the same page for what I need, right? Like, you probably really know what I need. Um, but there's a certain lifestyle I think I need, right? And that's not necessarily the truth, right? And so it's one of those places where I should take a moment and think about, it's one of those yardsticks or measuring sticks, as Kevin calls them, and is God the central fact of my life, right? Do I invite God into all aspects of my life? Do I spend time praying and meditating before I run off making big decisions all on my own, right? So, just one of those measuring sticks. So reading on. Also, it tells us in that paragraph, there's an asterisk and it says, it's more fully explained in Appendix 2. And we like to read Appendix 2. It's going to reference it a number of times, but we like to read Appendix 2 um, after we read, uh, when do we like to read it? We agnostics, after we read the next chapter. So, um, if you are as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle of the road solution. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible, and if we had passed from the region from which there is no return through human aid, we had but two alternatives. Two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, and the other to accept spiritual help, right? So, we understand that, I can't pick and choose. This isn't an a la carte program. We hear people say, take what you like and leave the rest, or something like that. That does not work for me. That's a middle of the road solution. This is not, like high school where I can pass with a C. This is just pass fail. I either pass or I fail, right? And I can't, um, take the chance that these are the parts I can leave out and still pass, right? There's no failing is deadly, right? Um, and so it gives us this dilemma, right? I If I've passed through this zone of being able to stop based on human aid, right, or on my willpower, right? So meaning, there are certain educational varieties of alcoholics that Appendix 2 is going to talk about when we get to that. Maybe when I started drinking, I wasn't full-blown alcoholic, and maybe I could have stopped at some point, right? Some people, right from day one, full-blown alcoholics, no chance of stopping on their own. But many people start off as hard drinkers, and they go through this point of no return, and by the time they realize they're alcoholic, it's much too late, right? So that's what they're talking about when they says we were in a position of life was becoming impossible. And if we had passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, right? I've passed beyond this point where I'm going to be able to stop on my willpower, human aid of some type, right? We had but two alternatives. So it gives us this dilemma. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, right? Continue drinking to the bitter end till it kills me. And the other is to accept spiritual help. And in hindsight, some years later, it seems like such an easy choice to make, right? It seems like it's such an easy decision. But I know that at the time, and I know and I must remember that for most newcomers, when we're working with them, it's not necessarily an easy decision, right? When we have these prejudices and these preconceived ideas, like I had, against spirituality and religion and all of those things, this is not always such an obvious, easy choice for people to make. And we need to be sensitive to that and understand that, I think, right? When somebody's like, I don't know, I don't think I can do it, it's not always just an easy decision. Years later, in hindsight, it seems like it should be, though. I can tell you that for sure. So as best as we could, and the other to accept spiritual help. This we did because we honestly wanted to and were willing to make the effort. Um, a certain American businessman had ability, good sense, and high character. For years, he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. He'd consulted the best known American psychiatrists, then had gone to Europe, placing himself in the care of the celebrated physician, the psychiatrist Dr. Young, who prescribed for him. Though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. Right? So, is everybody familiar with this story? Does everybody know the story? Um, I was just catching up in the chat. But Roland Hazard is this young man who comes from an extremely wealthy family. He's very, very well off, right? And so his family thinks he has a case of the nerves, which results in a bit of a drinking problem. And they've consulted all these different American psychiatrists, and they're trying to get him help, and to no avail. So they decide that they're going to send him to the most preeminent, famous psychiatrist at the top of the psychiatry game, and they want to send him to Freud. But Freud's not taking any new patients. So who's next on the list, right? So one of Freud's contemporaries is Dr. Carl Jung. And Freud and Jung both studied under the same psychiatrist, this guy named Adler, and were very quite similar. And Freud was kind of the most preeminent, famous of psychiatrists, but Carl Jung was right up there with him. So he goes off to see um, Carl Jung. He spends an entire year in Europe being treated by him. And at the end of that year, he is very confident that he's learned so much about himself. He understands his inner workings. There's no possible way he could drink. He starts making his way back across Europe to come home to North America. He gets to France. 3 days, it's 3 days after he leaves Young's care, stops in to visit some family friends, and with those family friends at dinner, they toast his newfound sobriety with a glass of wine, and he's off to the races again, right? He's back uncontrollably drinking. He goes back to Carl Jung. Carl Jung tells him, he begs him for the truth. Is there no hope for me? And this is where we get our solution. As Carl Jung tells him there is, but it's a rearrangement of your inner workings. I've been trying to cause this to happen, but he tells him that his only hope is a spiritual solution. So he goes back to North America, gets involved with the Oxford group, but it's him that brings back the message that our solution is a spiritual solution, right? So that's where that comes from. Does that make sense? Okay, so he's been trying um, to get this to cause this to happen within him, right? So it's going to describe a bunch more of this, but maybe not in quite as much detail. So um, So nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. So he returned to this doctor, whom he admired, and asked him point blank why he could not recover. He wished above all things to regain self-control. He seemed quite rational and well balanced with respect to other problems, yet he had no control whatever over alcohol. Why was this? He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. He could never regain his position in society, and he would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was a great physician's opinion. So the physician tells him that there's no hope for you, right? I can't help you. But this man still lives and is a free man. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on this earth where other free men may go without disaster, provided he remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude. Some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. Let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with the doctor. The doctor said, "You have the mind of a chronic alcoholic, right? Chronic just means reoccurring over and over and over. I have never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you." Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang, right? So he tells them the truth. I've never seen somebody who drinks the way you do and stays the way you are recover from alcohol. He said to the doctor, "Is there no exception?" "Yes," replied the doctor, "there is. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences," right? So then and there, he tells them what the solution is. The only way someone I've ever seen that drinks the way you do, that has alcoholism the way you do, has ever recovered and ever quit is having a vital spiritual experience, right? That's the solution. He gives it to him right there. To me, these occurrences are phenomena, right? A phenomena is something that we can't explain, right? He can't explain why this happens, what causes it to happen, why some people get it and others don't. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements, right? Oftentimes, for when he's seen it happen, it's been like a white light type moment, right? For somebody. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. In fact, I've been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful, but I've never been successful with an alcoholic of your description, right? So he's been able to help some alcoholics, possibly, potentially, maybe he's talking about hard drinkers or what we would know as hard drinkers now, right? But he says, I've never been successful in helping somebody get this spiritual connection that you need, that drinks like you do, right? And then again, it tells us, to see Appendix 2, right? So upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that after all, he was a good church member. This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctors telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, in his case, they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience, right? Um, you know, do we is it possible, this is one of my favorite questions from Kevin, is it possible to know God and not have or to believe in God, but not have a relationship with God, right? So if I'm going to have a vital spiritual experience, it's not just believing in God, right? It's doing His work. It's trying to be of service to my fellow mankind. It's doing all of those things that that our book tells us to do. It's doing those steps. It's our service work. It's sponsoring. It's just in everyday life. Just trying to not be a selfish, self-centered person that I spent the first 45 years of my life being, right? So, so what he's saying is, it's great you've got these religious ideas and that you're a man of religion, but in your case, it did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience, right? It's being a church member isn't enough on its own, right? That's all great, it's all good, but that's not in and of itself enough. So here was the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience, which, as we have already told you, made him a free man. We in turn sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, or if you prefer, a design for living that really works. The distinguished American psychologist William James, in his book Varieties of Religious Experience, indicates a multitude of ways in which men have discovered God. We have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way by which faith can be acquired. If what we have learned and felt and seen means anything at all, it means that all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, are the children of a living creator with whom we may form a relationship upon simple and understandable terms as soon as we're willing and honest enough to try. Right? As soon as I'm willing and honest enough to try, um, that door will open for me, right? That forming a relationship with our creator. Those having religious affiliations will find here nothing disturbing to their beliefs or ceremonies. There is no friction among us over such matters. We think it no concern of ours what religious bodies our members identify themselves with as individuals. This should be an entirely personal affair, which each one decides for himself in the light of past associations or his present choice. Not all of us join religious bodies, but most of us favor such memberships, right? So there are lots and lots of people in AA have religious affiliations, but it's not necessary, right? That's a personal choice. Here we talk about a spiritual connection to a higher power, right? That's what we talk about here. In the following chapter, there appears an explanation of alcoholism as we understand it, then a chapter addressed to the agnostic. Many who once were in this class are now among our members. Surprisingly enough, we find such convictions no great obstacle to a spiritual experience, right? So I think most people that show up at AA are either angry at God, agnostic, or believe they're atheist, and a few actually maybe are atheists. But um, none of that um, has any impact on our ability to get sober, right? It doesn't matter where I'm starting at, as long as I have that willingness a little bit to believe that potentially there's something out there, right? As long as I'm willing to open that door a crack, it doesn't matter where I'm starting. We'll all get to the finish line. Further on, clear-cut directions are given showing how we recovered, right? Those 12 steps. Um, these are followed by 42 personal experiences, right? Those stories in the back, right? And every single one of those stories will be what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now, right? Or in other words, it's what were my cycle stories that we talk about in the cycle? How did I get connected to God, and how amazing is my life now? And that's what those stories, those 42 stories in the back are about. Um, we hope no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. Our hope is that many alcoholic men and women desperately in need will see these pages, and we believe that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that they will be persuaded to say, yes, I am one of them too. I must have this thing, right? So only by fully disclosing ourselves, right? Those one-on-one conversations, those messages of depth and weight, where I tell somebody and I talk about what my life was like, not what they have to do, right? And then we hope that they will see that maybe they're just like us in a lot of ways, and that they want to have this thing too, right? So that's the end of that. Any questions about that chapter or that? I always like to ask if there's any questions or comments before we move on. Gail knows from Mondays. So, does anybody have any comments they'd like to make and before we start the next chapter or add? No? Okay. Okay, well let's start on chapter 3 because we still have lots of time. Chapter 3 is more about
Brad,
alcoholism.
there is
Oh,
a question from
oh,
Lorraine.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Lorraine.
Yeah, sorry,
Where'd you go?
Brad. I'm right here.
That's okay. Hey, Lorraine.
Yeah, hi, Brad. Oops, there I am again. I was in the Monday one, and we just finished reading also Dr. Bob's uh, story at the very end of 164, and I'm thinking a lot of the talk about the agnostic and so forth in Dr. Bob's time, they didn't have an answer for that, but throughout their discovery, they discovered there was a way to have everybody find their higher power in their own way.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking maybe that for some people, maybe they don't go into the Dr. Bob story because when he says that about you're missing out if you don't. But in the We Agnostics, it really does describe a spiritual way for all of us. Just as
Hmm.
observation, but thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. My favorite promise in the entire book says, having had a spiritual experience as a result of these steps, right? It's the first 1/3 of step 12, right? It's if I do this to the best of my abilities, as honestly as I can, I'm going to get one result, right? And it's the result that I need to have. And so that's my favorite thing about it. Um, awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Lorraine. Anybody else? No? Okay. Um, Chapter 3, more about alcoholism. This chapter, this is a place I really like to start. Sometimes with people that have been around for a while and have been struggling and relapsing. And what this chapter is going to do is it's going to tell us 4 different stories for 4 different reasons. I think, the first story is going to tell us is this man of 30, right? And the point of his story is, he quits drinking for um, a significant amount of time, right? 25 years. And because he wants to focus on business, right? And so he quits drinking, and then after that a significant amount of time, he thinks that it's safe to drink again, right? And I think that he's the extreme example of somebody that's quit drinking for a long time. I when I first was thinking about quitting drinking, I thought I just needed to quit for a month and all my problems would I could sort out all my problems, right? Um, you know, so oftentimes you hear, people they quit for a year. I had a friend that relapsed at 51 weeks sober, right? Like he just didn't, anyways, like the year was a milestone, I guess. But so we're going to learn about, what happens if I quit for a significant amount of time and then I start drinking again. Then we're going to read about this guy named Jim. And Jim is an example of a low bottom drunk. He'd lost everything, right? He lost everything in life before he got sober. So he's what we'd call a low bottom drunk. And then we're going to read about the jaywalker, and the jaywalker is the only guy I could understand in this book. In this chapter was the only guy that made sense to me. Like I could see how ridiculous it was that he was doing. And then they use that example as a way of showing us, exactly how we're thinking, but with alcohol instead of jaywalking, right? And that became really clear to me when I read that. And then the last guy is this man named Fred, and Fred's a high bottom drunk, and he's an example of somebody that didn't lose everything, but his life was unbearable nonetheless, right? So over the course of this chapter, we're really going to be focusing on that insane thought that precedes the first drink, right? That strange mental twist where I'm going to take that first drink when I should know better. I should know that time after time after time after time after time, I take that first drink thinking that this time it's going to be different and the outcome will be different. And I'm just going to have a couple of drinks and I'll be home, for dinner and to bathe those little toddlers, those kids of mine when they were little, and put them to bed and read them bedtime stories. And I just stopped in at the neighborhood pub for 2, right? Before dinner. And so that's this chapter is really about that strange mental twist that what is it that makes me think this time I'm going to drink like a gentleman, this is the time it's going to be different, this is the time that I'm actually going to have the willpower to control my drinking, right? So let's get started. Chapter 3, more about alcoholism. Most of us have been unwilling to admit we are real alcoholics. No person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and rely and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. Right? So, right off the bat, it says that no person likes to admit that he's different than others, right? Bodily and mentally, right? I don't want to think that you can do something I can't do, Why can you control your drinking and I can't, right? But exactly what I was talking about was the idea, therefore it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal alcoholic, right? That's the obsession of the mind. Someday I'm going to be able to control my drinking and enjoy it, right? Have you ever heard anyone say, I can't control my drinking and enjoy it? If I control my drinking, I can't enjoy it. And if I enjoy my drinking, I can't control it, right? So that's the great obsession every time. I'm going to control and enjoy my drinking. This time it's going to be different. This is the time I'm actually going to do it. I did that little story I described a few minutes ago. I did that over and over and over and over again for months and months on months on end. And I actually believed that I could control my drinking. And one time when I made the phone call to say to my wife that I was just stopping in for two and I'd be home right away, and you could just hear the disgust in her voice. And I'm like, well, what's your problem? And she's like, no, you won't be home. And I was like, what are you talking about? I just did it the other day. And she's like, that was 8 months ago. Right. And so um, I hung my hat on that 8 month ago time for forever and ever, that I thought I was in control, right? I thought I could control what I was doing. So, oh yeah, this describes it exactly. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing, right? Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death, right? So many people don't ever want to stop. There's, not everybody shows up saying, hey, I got a problem, I need help. Some people just never get to that point, right? So we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery, right? The first step in recovery is I have to fully concede to my innermost self that I am an alcoholic, right? Admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable, right? That's the first step. Here it is described. I'll tell you, the first time I read this book by myself, I got to page 60 and a half, and it said, being convinced we were now at step 3. And I missed this part where it told me a little bit about what step 1 was, right? I'm searching for step 1 and 2 when I got to where it finally told me I was at step 3. But here's a really good clue right there where it says, this is the first step in recovery. It goes right over my head when I try to do this on my own, right? The delusion, right? So the false belief, right? The delusion that we are like other people or presently maybe has to be smashed, right? If I'm going to be, if I'm going to get step 1, I understand step 1 intellectually really easy, right? It's really easy to understand what step 1 is intellectually, but I say I have to believe it in my soul, right? This delusion that I'm ever going to be able to drink like somebody else has to be smashed, right? If I have this nagging thought that maybe I'm going to be able to drink someday like somebody, like a normal drinker, I'm probably going to drink again, right? If I think that I just have to stop for a year, or I was just young, or I was just foolish, or I just need to play the tape through to the end, right? I'm probably going to drink again. I have to have this delusion has to be smashed. We alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. We know that no real alcoholic ever recovers control, right? I'm never going to get control over it. All of us felt at times that we were regaining control, but such intervals, usually brief, were inevitably followed by still less control, which led in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. We're convinced to a man that alcoholics of our type are in the grip of a progressive illness. Over any considerable period, we get worse, never better, right? If I can maybe dress up my drinking a little bit and look, and control it, or, just do a little bit better maybe I can do that over a brief interval, right? But over any considerable interval of time, my alcoholism will progress, right? It will get worse, never better. We are like men who have lost their legs. They never grow new ones. Neither does there appear to be any kind of treatment which will make alcoholics of our kind like other men. We have tried every imaginable remedy. In some instances, there has been brief recovery, followed always by a still worse relapse. Physicians who are familiar with alcoholism agree there is no such thing as making a normal drinker out of an alcoholic. Science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet. To the best of my knowledge, it still hasn't. Despite all we can say, many who are real alcoholics are not going to believe they are in that class. By every form of self-deception and experimentation, they will try to prove themselves exceptions to the rule, therefore non-alcoholic. If anyone who is showing an inability to control his drinking can do the right about face and drink like a gentleman, our hats are off to him. Heaven knows we have tried hard enough and long enough to drink like other people. So it says, here are some of the methods we have tried. So they're going to give a bunch of different methods that those first 100 people had tried in order to try and control their drinking. First of all, I will tell you, normal drinkers never tried a single one of these because the thought never occurred to them that they had a problem. So if you tried any of these or anything like this on your own, welcome. Right? I can tell you, I tried several of them. Here are some of the methods we have tried. Drinking beer only, limiting the number of drinks, never drinking alone, never drinking in the morning, drinking only at home, never having it in the house, never drinking during business hours, drinking only at parties, switching from scotch to brandy, drinking only natural wines, agreeing to resign if ever drunk on the job, taking a trip, not taking a trip, swearing off forever, with and without a solemn oath, taking more physical exercise, reading inspirational books, going to health farms and sanitariums, accepting voluntary commitment to asylums. We could increase the list ad infinitum, right? Infinitely more things. So does any of that sound familiar to anyone? I had a funny conversation with my daughter, I don't know, a year ago, right? She lives in New Zealand. Actually, it was probably 2 years ago. And they hadn't been back to North America since COVID, and they were coming back. And she was worried. She said they were hiding the good scotch in their house because her mother-in-law was coming to stay at their house and look after their dog while they were gone. And I was like, "Oh, Scotch, you guys drink that stuff? It's horrible stuff." And my daughter says, "Oh yeah, no, we like it." She says, like, but and I said, "Well, I just spent a good long time trying to drink Scotch as a way to control my drinking because I hate the stuff and I thought it would slow me down." She's like, "That's a real thing, Dad?" Like, then I'm like, "Well, my daughter's not alcoholic," because she didn't understand that at all. But when I explained to her that I spent a long time drinking Scotch because I couldn't stand it, and I drank it anyways, she was like, her response told me that she's probably not an alcoholic. She thought that was just the weirdest, strangest, dumbest thing ever. So I was like, well, that's kind of good to know. But she thought there was definitely something wrong with her dad. So, but several of those things, I tried on that list, right? And I saw some head shaking, like, yeah, tried some of those for sure, right? So, anyways, normal drinkers never do that. I'll give you another things normal drinkers never do. Normal drinkers never sat around wondering if they were alcoholic. They don't ever think about that either. And I only realized this after being in AA for probably 5 years, that the very first time I read this book, when it gave the description of a normal drinker, a hard drinker, and the real alcoholic, as I was reading the book, I kept going back to that drinker, or that description of the hard drinker, and kept hoping and praying that I was just a hard drinker. And normal drinkers don't do that either, right? Like, nobody was hoping and praying that they're just a hard drinker. So all of those things, this list included, make me realize that I probably am in the right place, and I think you guys are too. So again, welcome. We do not like to pronounce any individual as alcoholic, but you can quickly diagnose yourself. Step over to the nearest bar room and try some controlled drinking. Try to drink and stop abruptly. Try it more than once. It will not take long for you to decide. If you are honest with yourself about it, it may be worth a bad case of jitters if you get a full knowledge of your condition, right? So if I'm going to go to a bar and I'm going to have 2 drinks and I'm going to try and stop abruptly, what am I going to learn about myself? I go have a few drinks, try to stop, and I can't stop, right? We're talking about the physical craving there, right? The body, the allergy of once I introduce alcohol into my body, I develop the need for more and I can't stop, right? And so really that's what they're talking about there. Now, Kevin likes to point out that you probably shouldn't have to do that anymore. And there's enough people around. Remember that when this book was written and published, when they were writing it, there was like 100 people sober, right? And so now, rather than going and testing that, I would much prefer to sit down with you and talk about the cycle of alcoholism and share some stories and probably see how in your past you were unable to control your drinking once you started, right? Rather than having nobody to explain that to you and going and trying the experiment yourself. I think that it could probably be covered off in a conversation now. I have a friend in Montana who she said that the old timers used to tell her to go to the bar and have a few drinks and then try and stop. And she says she was absolutely convinced that the reason she never stopped wasn't because she couldn't, it was because she changed her mind and decided that she didn't want to stop. So I was like, that's kind of the point. But anyways, that was an interesting, fun conversation. So that sort of was an example or a recommendation that they gave back then, though. So though there is no way of proving it, we believe that early in our drinking careers, most of us could have stopped drinking, right? So we're talking about this progression of the alcoholism and maybe going from a hard drinker into a real alcoholic, right? And crossing that imaginary line. But the difficulty is that few alcoholics have enough desire to stop while there is yet time, right? So I'm a hard drinker. I'm not seeing any real problems or come from it, right? And then I cross this line, but I don't start seeing, and so now I'm a full-blown alcoholic, but I don't start having all these negative outcomes and things happening until it's much too late, right? So that's what they're saying is my disease has progressed to a place where I can no longer drink and control it and stop, but um, I had no desire to stop until it was much too late, right? And that describes me. I'm convinced of it. Um, we have heard of a few instances where people who showed definite signs of alcoholism were able to stop for a long period because of an overpowering desire to do so. Here's one. So we're going to read about this man of 30 now, and sort of his experience with stopping drinking. A man of 30 was doing a great deal of spree drinking. He was very nervous in the morning after these bouts and quieted himself with more liquor. He was ambitious to succeed in business, but saw that he would get nowhere if he drank at all. Once he started, he had no control whatever. He made up his mind that until he had been successful in business and had retired, he would not touch another drop. An exceptional man, he remained bone dry for 25 years and retired at the age of 55 after a successful and happy business career, right? So this man is the exception. Like he decided that alcohol was interfering with his goals in life and his business goals in life. And he decided to quit drinking until he retired. So he stops drinking for 25 years, right? Retires at the age of 55. Then he fell victim to the belief, which practically every alcoholic has, that his long period of sobriety and self-discipline had qualified him to drink as other men. Out came his carpet slippers and a bottle. In 2 months, he was in a hospital, puzzled and humiliated, right? So 25 years being sober, within 2 months, he's in the hospital, right? After having his first drink. He tried to regulate his drinking for a while, making several trips to the hospital meantime. So now he's in and out of the hospital. Then, gathering all his forces, he attempted to stop altogether and found he could not, right? Gathering all of his willpower, right? He tried extra hard and found he was still not able to quit. Every means of solving his problem which money could buy was at his disposal. So remember, he was a successful businessman. He had all the money at his disposal, and none of it helped. Every attempt failed. Though a robust man at retirement, he went to pieces quickly and was dead within 4 years. So he's a 55-year-old, not an old man, right? He was 55 years old, vibrant, healthy, financially successful, 25 years without drinking, and started drinking again, could not stop, and it killed him in 4 years, right? So if I stop for a year, I'm probably in trouble if I think I can drink again, right? The case contains a powerful lesson. Most of us have believed that if we remained sober for a long stretch, we could thereafter drink normally. But here's the man who at 55 years found he was just where he had left off at 30. We have seen the truth demonstrated again and again. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Commencing to drink after a period of sobriety, we're in a short time as bad as ever. If we're planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservation of any kind, nor any lurking notion that someday we will be immune to alcohol. Right? So that insane mental thought that told him that this time would be different is he believed he was justified and it would be okay to drink because he'd been sober for 25 years, right? So he thought that it would be fine. I like the last paragraph or the last sentence in this paragraph we just read as well. It says, if we're planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservation of any kind, nor any lurking notion that someday we'll be immune to alcohol. Right? So no reservation of any kind, right? I know people that have gone back out drinking because, I sponsored a guy that got sober at 19. Now he'd spent a year in prison and 6 months in a treatment center, and then thought he was sober for a year and a half, and then decided, he was 19 years old and he just made some foolish decisions, and you know, and he was young and that it would be okay. He just made some bad decisions that it would be okay to drink again, right? So he had this lurking notion that he was young, right? So if we are working with anybody that has some idea, any of these lurking notions or a reservation, right? I was just young and foolish. If your life was like mine, you would drink too, right? We have to help these people get over those ideas and squash those reservations. Because if I have a reason to believe that I'm different than the rest of you, I will drink every time, right? If I have, if my case is special, I was just young and foolish. I can't use that one anymore. But I didn't learn my lessons, though, I can tell you that. Um, I am going to probably relapse, right? So it's identifying these strange mental twists and these reservations that some people we work with might have, right? So, young people may be encouraged by this man's experience to think they can stop as he did on their own willpower, right? I've never known anybody that's been able to stop anywhere near as long as this guy did. We doubt if many of them can do it, because none will really want to stop, and hardly one of them, because of the peculiar mental twist already acquired, will find that he can win out. Several of our crowd, men of 30 or less, had been drinking only a few years, but they found themselves as helpless as those who had been drinking 20 years. To be gravely affected, one does not necessarily have to drink a long time, nor take the quantities some of us have, right? We can't judge one person's alcoholism against somebody else's, right? Low bottom, high bottom, how many years they drank, how many years, how old they are, none of that, right? Is alcoholism, right? This is particularly true of women. Potential female alcoholics often turn into the real thing and are gone beyond recall in a few years. That seems like a bit of a sexist remark to me, but I've talked to lots of women that believe it true, so I'll just leave it at that. Um, Certain drinkers who would be greatly insulted if called alcoholics are astonished at their inability to stop. We are familiar with the symptoms. We who are familiar with the symptoms see large numbers of potential alcoholics among young people, young people everywhere, but try and get them to see it. Right. So, lots and lots of potential alcoholics. I was greatly offended in the early days when anybody suggested to me that maybe I should um, stop drinking or seek help with my drinking. There was no way that I had a problem. I also surrounded myself with people who drank like I did, so it just seems like, there's no other way of life. It seems like that's how everybody drinks. At the bottom, it says, true when this book was first published, but a 2014 US Canada membership survey showed about 12% of AAs were 30 and under, right? So remember, the first 100 were largely middle-aged, um, middle-aged men from a certain background, right? And by this point, the membership is starting to change as more people are finding their way to these meetings and stuff. There's more and more women, and just more and more people from different parts of society. So as we look back, we feel we had gone on drinking many years beyond the point where we could quit on our willpower, right? Our alcoholism had progressed over that magic line where I can choose to stop on my own. If anyone questions whether he has entered this dangerous area, let him try leaving liquor alone for 1 year. If he is a real alcoholic and very far advanced, there is scant chance of his success. In the early days of our drinking, we occasionally remained sober for a year or more, becoming serious drinkers again later. Though you may be able to stop for a considerable period, you may yet be a potential alcoholic. We think few to whom this book will appeal can stay dry anything like a year. Some will be drunk the day after making their resolutions, most of them within a few weeks, right? So now they're suggesting that maybe we should consider stopping drinking if we don't think we have a problem for a year, right? Or if we do think we have a problem, maybe we should consider stop drinking for a year. So that test is there to tell me if I have this mental obsession with alcohol, right? If I don't have a problem with alcohol, why wouldn't I just stop, right? I know many people that given if alcohol um, became a problem in their lives, and a spouse, a doctor, a boss, any of those said, hey, you're losing your health, you should stop drinking, it's impacting your physical health. Or in a relationship, or a boss, hey, you're going to lose your job if things don't change, and they will stop, right? I will tell you a story about um when that was suggested to me that I might want to stop drinking. And I had at this time in my life, the last probably year or so before I got sober, I was in a relationship with somebody that drank like I did. And for a while, neither one of us were working. And just anyways, we're living this life of, it was a very explosive and relationship, and a lot of drinking and things not going well. And we had split up for a while. And then I came up with this plan where I phoned her one day and said I was more miserable without her than I was with her, which was my opening line. So super romantic. And told her that I thought that we should try to fix our relationship, but there was some things that we needed to do that. And one of them was, I thought we should quit drinking for a month because that would give us time to sort out our problems. Another one was that we should go to couples counseling because I thought she'd like to hear that. And the last one was I would quit talking to that girl in Florida every day that I used to go see on a semi-regular basis. So she agreed only to the Florida part right off the bat, but eventually we did the rest. And we go see this. She finds a couples counselor. We haven't stopped drinking yet, but the night before we go see this counselor, we like, this is it. It's this party time. Tomorrow's the day we're going to not drink for a month. So we go see this guy completely hungover, and his first question is, what is it that brings you to me? Why are you guys here? And so I told him my 3-part plan. He also agreed with the Florida thing, which I thought was rude. And then looked at me and said, why don't you tell me about your drinking? And for the first time with someone in the medical profession, I was pretty honest, and I told him. And then he looked at her and he said, why don't you tell me about your drinking? And she was pretty honest as well. And after that, he looked at us and he said, you know what? I think you're going to find you're going to want to quit drinking for more than a month. And I was like, what are you talking? 2 months, 3 months, what? And he says, I think you're going to find you're going to want to quit drinking permanently. And that's the last thing I heard him say. That guy was absolutely nuts. He was crazy, right? I don't remember anything else that happened that first session. I remember none of it, right? I remember we went outside. His office was in downtown Calgary. We went outside. I looked at her and I said, that guy was effing crazy. He is nuts, right? Um, so anyways, the long and the short of it is we went to see him for some time. I was working out of town. He was this amazing man that I would never know when I was going to be back in Calgary. And he would either fit us in on his lunch hour because I was in town, or he would come downtown and meet us on a Saturday or whatever. He just went way out of his way to help us. Eventually he started directing us and pushing us towards AA. And then we both got sober. And then I moved back to Calgary and started working. We went to see him and I said, "Hey, we can have regularly scheduled appointments now." And he's like, "You guys can stop coming here. You don't need to come here anymore." But it was only after we had been sober for probably 2 years that I found out that when we started meeting him, he had been a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous for 23 years. And he was the perfect guy for us to see, right? It was amazing, right? It was an amazing God shot for sure. So, anyways, that's I think where we should stop for the day. But yeah, thank you everybody, and thanks for sticking around till the end. It's good to see